right, everybody. We got another very special guest for you all. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Mr. Bart Sears. Welcome, Bart.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to have you on the show. You know, we've been promoting a lot of new indie writers and artists and stuff lately. I think the last 10 or so interviews. So it's awesome to have someone like you on that I know your stuff. I've seen it around everywhere, you know, between Marvel and DC and, the iconic Justice League Europe cover that I know because I'm a huge DC fan. So cool. It's awesome to have you on the show today, man. So thanks for being here.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been doing this like 38 years now, I think.
Nice. I haven't gotten sick of it yet. That's good.
Burnt out more than a few times, so
yeah.
School's not
that. I know it's your first time here, so we got to put you through the gauntlet of the origin story.
Right.
We don't have to spend too much time on it, but so you said 38 years. So where did it all begin for you? I know you did some stuff with gaming too, and that type of art. So
yeah.
How did you get into the comics?
Let's see. I was in 80. I guess it was 85. I went to the Kubert School for a year and a little bit more, and then the second year I burned out. I hated to draw, and I quit and went back home and moved furniture for a while, and decided that necessarily wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. So I did some samples and took them to Marvel and got work. So, different times.
Yeah.
That's you knock on the door, somebody comes see you, and it was a young Mike Carland, very tall, very skinny Mike Carland, and he brought me back into Marvel and introduced me to a bunch of editors, and ended up doing work with Larry Hama.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I can't remember who
started off.
Editor was at the time. I think it might have been Jim Owsley editing Spider-Man at the time, and he wanted to put me on stuff, but he didn't have anything available. Which is a shame, because I was definitely more prepared to do that kind of stuff than I was to do the biker girl stories that Larry Hama gave me. That was much harder and something I was not as into. So
yeah, you were really reading those types of books.
Yeah. It was like, and I was not a guy that grew up drawing chicks. I was always, in love with Conan and Tarzan and Doc Savage, and I was these powerful,
Yeah, the heroes.
Heroic men doing, powerful heroic men things, and I get a biker chick story, so
that's we've heard the story a couple times from people, where you could just New York City, you could just walk into Marvel with a portfolio and be like, "Hey, what do you think?" And so, what are you walking in there with? Is it Spider-Man sketches? Is it just a bunch of stuff?
I did 3 sample pages.
Oh, okay.
And that's all I took. I wish I still had them. I have no idea what happened to them. Never. I remember them sort of, but I have no idea what happened to them, because I never throw anything out. I don't know if somebody at Marvel kept them. I have no idea.
There's some art dealer at a con somewhere.
Like under a desk somewhere in the old Marvel studio on Park Ave.
Yeah.
Is there a standard back then of what the pages are, or do you just find like whatever scripts you can find and just draw them out and try to send them out?
I couldn't even find scripts back then. I just made up stuff, and I knew I had to draw cars and normal people and buildings and stuff. So, I put heroes into, of course, because you've got it. But I just made sure it covered all the bases so they could see I could draw anything that came up.
That's awesome.
Not motorcycles on time back then.
Yeah, that's a little different. You don't see that happening in Justice League too much and stuff.
No.
So how did the connection at DC happen? It's just like your work at Marvel and they pulled you over there?
I did one of the biker chick stories for Larry. I penciled it, turned it in, and he said, "Okay, go ink it." And I was like, I could barely pencil, let alone ink.
Right.
So I went back and I inked it. I turned it, and I hated every minute of it. Meantime, I did a Sectors toy comic. I don't know if you remember the Sectors. They were these little bug toys, and you put your hand in, and there'd be spider crawls, and you have the action figure sitting on it. So I did a little toy book from that, which was far more in my wheelhouse at the time. That I blazed through. And then he gave me the second biker chick story, and I told him there was no way I was going to ink it. But I knew my pencils weren't up to par, so I spent forever penciling it, and it came out much, much better. But it took forever, and I never followed up after that with Marvel. I started doing work for TSR. I did a Wolverine adventure game book and a Doctor Strange adventure game book and a couple other things. And meanwhile, a buddy of mine, Mark Pennington, who I went to Kubert school with, he'd got hired right out of Kubert school to do G.I. Joe toy design. And he pushed them to hire me to do presentation paintings, which were big, full paintings of proposed characters. But, energy, nice paintings. Dave Dorman was doing a lot of them at the time. I think he probably did most of them. And they would set these up in the meeting room. They had this, I don't know, what do you call it? Stadium seating, this big meeting room at Hasbro. And they would line them up all on the wall and bring in the bigwigs, the two brothers that owned it and others. And they would, out of, 24 G.I. Joes, they'd pick 18 for that year or something.
Wow.
So that was the second step in the process of creating their boys' toys. So I did a bunch of paintings for that, and then they brought me in and hired me full-time to be another Joe guy. But around the same time I was hired, they got a new property called Cops and Crooks. So after 2 weeks on Joe, they just put me on Cops and Crooks, which was really cool because they wanted to do it like a 5-inch tall, but on that same skinny Joe figure buck. And I talked them into letting me create new bucks for it that were more heroic. So I designed the bucks that the engineers then took and, made work. But that's what everything was sculpted on, were the more heroic bucks, which was really cool.
That is really cool. Yeah. So that's crazy to me. It's like, okay, we have all these awesome G.I. Joe figures for the year, and the way they pick them is you do like concept art, and they just point at them in a room. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So who's coming to you with like the idea for the character? It's like, oh, okay, we have Snake Eyes and all these other people, but like, how does that work?
Marketing would come up with some, and a lot of times it was just whatever team was on the book would say, with whoever was Greg. God, I can't remember his last name right now. Greg was the head of Boys Toys, so he ran all the teams. And you just have, jam sessions, or you just sit down and say, I want to do a fireman cop or whatever, and it would be that simple. And we'd come up with names and ideas for them, but then once they were picked, marketing would take over. And for Joe, both Joe's and Cops, Larry Hama wrote all the backgrounds and came up with the names and all the detail that was actually used for the character.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's something I don't think about now. I mean, because it's probably done a lot differently today, I would think. And
I've got no idea. Yeah. It's been years since I've been in the toy arena, so I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I used
to change. So
yeah, that's true.
So the toys, they just take the ideas that you guys came up with back then, just keep re-releasing them.
Yeah, that's true. Vintage packaging and all that stuff. It's like, oh, I want those back. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, it feels like every other year He-Man figures come out again.
That'd have been a fun line to work on. Yeah. Never got to. Did a lot of WWF figures and different stuff like that too. And then I did all the Marvel X-Men figures, or most of them, from 92, 93, and 94 from Toy Biz.
Yep. So Chris probably has a few of those.
Those were definitely ones I had growing up.
Those were a lot. And I only got that job because the guys at Toy Biz, I don't know if you remember the 90s, but, the number of titles lists like balloons, so they were starting to hire, anybody who could hold a pencil to draw comics.
Yeah.
And the big thing was I don't know how to draw, so just cover everything with lines. And the toy guys couldn't figure out what any of the characters looked like.
Oh, wow.
Toy Biz. And they knew that I had done a lot of toy work. So they were like, can you design these for us? Can you do the 3 views so we know what the hell to sculpt? And I said, sure. And I started looking at this stuff. I was like, wow, there's not a view that matches this, whatever his front chest piece is. It's different every time he draws it. It's different on the side. Yeah. He forgets it in some shots. No wonder these guys had no idea. So I just did a best version of each of the characters I was given.
It's like a Frankenstein of all the best parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the 90s was just like, okay, this panel, he's got way more muscles than the last panel, and now there's new muscles. Like, what's going on?
And pouches.
Yeah, pouches.
Lots of pouches.
Yeah, pouches, big guns, and muscles.
Yeah.
That's where it was at. Oh, yeah. I have a bunch of those books for sure.
But it was a lot of fun. But
and then go ahead.
When I was working on Cops, DC had got the rights to do the comic book.
Okay.
So Doug Munch and the editor Andy Helfer came up to meet with marketing to figure out, how to do the comic, learn about the line, and see everything. And the marketing guy knew I had been in comics and liked comics, so he let me sit in the meeting and told me to bring my portfolio to show him. So when everything was done, they looked at my portfolio, and Helfer's like, "Hey, you want to draw some comics for me?" I'm like, "Sure." So he hired me to draw Cops issue 4, and I immediately quit that day, which I found out was a year to the day I was hired at Hasbro, which was kind of funny. Wow. Don't pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
But he's like, don't quit. I can't promise you anything. Don't quit. It's like, it's too late. I'll be able to do comics. I knew I could do comics. And that year at Hasbro, I learned a lot about controlling my time and,
deadlines.
Yeah, just how to get stuff done. And so I did issue 4 of Cops, and this should have been a clear sign of how comics worked, he hired me to do issue 3 of Cops.
Wait a second.
So they planned to fill in for 4 because the artist was so late already. And I finished my issue, and I had to do issue 3 because he was still working on issue 1. But,
wow.
Yeah, so, and because I was a good boy there, he gave me Spectre monthly.
Wow. And
it was issue 18, and those were 24-page stories back then, the good old days of comics. And it was a Monday, and I had just finished page 6. It was late in the afternoon, and Andy called, Andy Helfer, and said, I need you to do this 80-page Invasion thing, the 3rd issue, because the artist just quit. And that was McFarlane, and he quit Invasion to go do Spider-Man. And Keith was jumping in to do issue 2, and they wanted me to do issue 3, and I had 10 weeks to do it. I was like, okay. I'm like, oh, it's 8 pages a week. But yeah, I'll do it. I got to draw every hero in the DC universe. But yeah, I'll do it. And Andy's like, great. We need you to come in Friday morning for like an 11:30 meeting, with the whole team and figure out what's going on and get everything, squared away because everything's so screwed up right now. And I'm like, okay. He's like, but you got to finish Spectre before you start. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, I have to bring in all the pages Friday. I was like, it's Monday about 5. I've got 18 pages left. Yeah. I have to leave here at 5 a.m. to get there at 11:30 on Friday. So I've got 3 days to do 18 pages. He's like, yeah, you can do it. A half hour of me going, Andy, there's no way in hell I can do this. So I finally was like, fine, I'll do it. Yeah. So I did. I banged out the last 18 pages. And,
wow.
Nobody please look up Spectre 18. It was also Mark's first inking job. I got Mark Pennington to ink the book.
Wow.
Which I then left, which great. Sorry, Mark. But it was his first, inking job at DC or Marvel, and not our finest hour, but we got it done. And I went in and jumped and did the 8 pages of Invasion every week for 10 weeks, and got it done. My reward for that was Justice League Europe.
Wow, that's you just had to get no sleep for a week, and then they no big deal.
No sleep for about 10 weeks because 8 pages a week is a lot.
Oh yeah, 8 pages a week too. Yeah, that's crazy.
When I was young, then I could do it. I could live on 2 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, but
oh man,
no longer.
That's
how it worked back then. I mean, if the company asked you to do something and you succeeded, they would fight to give you other work, even if there was nothing. They would create something because you're a good dude that did what you could to help. So far different times.
And Justice League Europe, I mean, that was I'd say a fairly big hit for a book that you were working on.
It always sold more than Justice League.
It did. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
I like 4,000 or 5,000, but yeah, it generally sold more.
Wow, that's insane. And it's something to be said too because
that's just me.
Yeah, a little biased there.
Writer, so
yeah, and that's awesome because I mean it's a great cover, and I mean I love that run, and
thanks,
I know Chris is hoping to see. He's not the biggest DC fan, but he wants to see like a Justice League International or Europe come back one day. He's waiting for it. Yeah,
I mean, everybody's talked to DC and offered to just do a one shot or a miniseries. Yeah. They just don't really have much interest in it.
Well, I think for their movie film division, whatever you want to call it, I think that's like something they could do that would be fun and different and like really stand out in a different way from what Marvel's doing.
Yep.
I think it's a blueprint for them to move forward.
I think it'd be really popular, but what do I know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's what the fans want. No, they won't give it to us. And then
Batman title.
Yeah, right. Yeah, here's your 6th Batman title. And then how did you get to Man of War? Was that after?
I was at DC forever. At one point, I had like a 12-year exclusive with them.
Wow. Okay.
And
that's crazy.
I had 7 years left, and my whole time I wanted a project I could not be rushed on, because when I started Justice League Europe, it was supposed to come out in like May or June, and I had finished the first issue and started the second issue, and it was a January, and my time might be a little off, but it's close enough. And I was at a show in Toronto, and some dude was like, "Oh, I can't wait to see, Justice League Europe #1." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know they announced it or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, June, it's going to be a great summer, book, blah, blah, blah. I'm just on the second issue." He's like, "No, it's coming out," and I can't remember if he said February or March. I was like, what do you mean?
That's awesome.
Like, "Oh yeah," and he showed me like the previews ad or whatever.
Oh wow.
It was. I was like, oh. So I got back, Monday, and I called Andy at the office. I'm like, I thought Justice League Europe was coming out in June or July. And he's like, "Oh no." I'm like, when's it coming out? And he's like, February or March, whatever it was. I think it was February. I don't know. And I was like, I just finished. I'm in the middle of issue 2, and it's January. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're behind."
Oh my god.
So it was weird. I was always behind on the book, and they got a fill-in for issue 9, which they then made me ink.
Wow.
And then they let me ink like issues 10 and 12, pencil and ink them, which takes more time. And I,
for sure,
especially since I was so new at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really understood all that deadline stuff and worries, but
it's I think it's interesting though, like, because I mean the amount of books that were coming out at that time, you would think that like they would have a process set up to always have an inker for books, right? Or that just wasn't something going on at the time, or?
Well, I can't remember exactly, but I know Pablo had a lot of other work. We were looking for another inker, and I finally found a guy I met in Syracuse, Randy Elliott, who was an up and coming inker, and was able to get him on the book. So I can't remember if, this was like a lull period where there was nobody like assigned to the book, and they were like, yeah, just go ink it. I don't remember. I don't know why. I know why I had to do the fill, and they wanted me to change it to look more like me, which I didn't really do. I pretty much just inked what was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Make this other art look like yours.
It was crazy.
Wow. So then you got onto Man of War because you wanted something less stressful.
They gave me the big Eclipso, the Dark Twin, Summer Spectacular, all the big crossover event they had every summer, which was great. And then they spun an Eclipso comic out of it, which I was never really happy with because I thought it would be Eclipso fighting all the heroes again in some way, shape, or form. They put him in South America, and he was a drug lord and stuff, and I really had no interest. And I begged them to put me on, just give me like a cool, 4-issue mini-series, because those were just coming out now, and one-shots, and, all those guys were making way more money than I was doing 3 or 4 issues a year. Mm-hmm. And I was like, just put me on that stuff. But they didn't want to because I could do a monthly. And all the guys that were doing that stuff were guys that really weren't doing monthlies or, lucked into it. I don't know which, but some form of both of that. And Steve Masarski, who was who ran Valiant at the time, started contacting me to try to bring me into their fold. And he really wooed me out in San Diego one year. So I quit DC and went with Valiant.
Wow. That's in the middle of the contract too, right? 12-year contract, or
yeah, I had like 7 years left, I think.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a long commitment to make, I think, for anything.
Back then, when you had a contract like that with DC or Valiant or Marvel or something, they gave you, health insurance and all kinds of benefits too. So it was and myself and all the guys in that time just thought this was how it was, and this is how it will be. I mean, we didn't know that. Yeah. We were relatively new to the industry. Neil and a bunch of the guys had fought for, getting your art back and better pay and contracts that that meant something and had benefits. And,
right.
And, I didn't know the history till much later, but, we just thought that's how it was, and it's never going to change. And then the 90s happened. And the collector's market and everything changed.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty insane.
The more money they got in the comics, the less they wanted to pay you, and the more other people took effect, which didn't affect comic sales. And they just diluted the market so bad. Because, DC, when I started at DC, they didn't think about canceling a book till it hit 30,000 copies. Wow. Most books don't sell 30,000 copies anymore. So,
yeah.
I was in the office when they would argue, an editor would argue to keep a guy, his book just hit 29, what are we going to do? We can see the trend. And he's like, well, let's keep it going for, 5 months, and I'll find something else for him. And Paul or Jeanette would be like, yeah, that sounds good. He's a good dude. And that's how the industry worked. That's what I grew up in it as. It was very family oriented in a strange way. But, I kind of took that for granted that that's how it'd always be. And it's certainly
interesting.
Did you guys also think, Valiant's fairly new at that point? They're kind of up and coming. Did you see them as another standard bearer then, and that's why you felt safe jumping ship? Or was it just the fact that you wanted to do something new?
Well, they offered me a lot more money.
That helps.
And I stupidly agreed to do 2 books a month, which I don't know why I did, but they wooed me into it. And I was very... At that point, like with Andy, you can do 18 pages in 3 days. You can do this. You can do that. I was very much, all right, I just got to do it. And with Valiant, I could not do it. At that point, I had penciling style had become much more a thing. When I got into comics, penciling style was a little bit, you'd kind of draw and people would ink it, and there'd be variances, but, guys like Byrne and Neil and stuff really started that whole process of the style was all in the pencils. And I think before that, it was like people just drew. And however they drew was it. And that's why you get people inking Kirby and Buscema. It looks a million different ways. Because their style, they didn't have a real finished penciling style. It was much rougher, I guess. It's just drawing. And I got really into that after leaving, or at the end of the DC or during DC and into Valiant. You know, I really wanted to do great stuff, so I really put I put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure the pencils were sweet, and I just couldn't keep up that amount of work in the time frame that was expected, and I ended up getting fired. But yeah, it happens.
I mean, you were trying to do over like 2 pages a day. That's pretty strenuous. That's crazy.
Which is weird because I can do it, and I've done it a bunch of times.
Yeah.
But whenever I plan to do it, you know, my brain gets in the way.
Yep.
It's when you try to people having trouble doing 10 issues a year, let alone you were doing 24.
No, I never did it. Never.
Yeah.
I had done 2 issues of Turok, 2 issues of EXO, and I did full 2 issues of Turok, something like that, and I got canned. I couldn't do it, and I wasn't mature enough and confident enough as a professional then to be open and upfront about it. I just kept thinking I can get 2 or 3 done today and send them in, and 2 or 3 more, and you know, I kept thinking I can do this. I can break it out, and but I learned a lot from that. I learned how to manage my time much better, and how not to commit to things, and how to be upfront about if I overcommitted, to say, "Whoa, this is going to go bad. You got to make a change here." So I learned a lot about professionalism through that experience.
And meanwhile, your art style's kind of evolving through that period, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got very illustrative with EXO, especially in Turok. Very liney, much more so than I was with Justice League. I mean, Justice League, I started out that way because that's where I was, and then I got much slicker and smoother, and started to develop a more hardline style with some rendering. And then, but with Valiant, I put the pressure on myself to really go nuts with it, and that was kind of the kiss of death because it takes just too long.
So, as someone that kind of started at that big bang of comics in the 90s and now where we are today, how do you feel about the use of digital art, using like digital for pages and stuff like that? I mean,
I've done a lot of both, and I tend to decide if I'm going to do a job on paper or digital based on, is there going to be any market for after sales of the art?
Okay.
And if there is, then I'll definitely do it on paper. And if there's not, and it's not, then I'll tend to veer towards, or if it's more of a marketing job, I'll veer towards the digital. I'm not a huge fan of computer color, the fully painted over the top color. I much prefer that late 80s when they started to just do some subtle tones and stuff, and better color theory rather than just throwing in, here's a green wall, there's a red wall, there's,
right,
much more color smart. I definitely prefer that old stuff printed on newsprint than the computer color. I mean, one of the reasons I got away from doing a lot of rendering was computer color was so powerful. Once it was printed, you never saw it. So I was like, why am I going to waste my time, spend a half day longer on a page to do all this rendering when no one's going to see it?
It won't come out.
Stop doing it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just didn't know if there was a technical advantage there for drawing.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about a computer, I mean, I've always worked with a light box. I do a small thumbnail, I blow it up half size, tighten that up and figure out most of the drawing. And then I blow that up and light box that onto a final page, either in pencil or ink, depending on what I'm doing. So computers just like that on on speed or crack or steroids, whatever you want to.
All three.
You could do so many layers. You could do everything, and you just, that looks like shit. So do another layer real quick.
Yep.
But the problem with computers that most people I know have that have been traditional most of their lives is you can blow it up. Right. So I would find I'd spend an hour on a face, on my screen that's this big, but it's going to be printed,
Yeah,
like
right.
that. And that was the toughest learning curve, is not to blow everything up. I just did, my wife and I created Maiden for heavy metal. And I did the first 5-issue story block of 8-page segments, completely digital, and I spent way too much time on it. But every detail in even the smallest panel is exact. And for whatever reason, I thought that would be a great idea, but it took me forever. And heavy metal doesn't pay real well, so I lost my shirt doing it. But it looks really cool. So
it looks awesome.
So, but I've also done digital jobs that, I just, rough out, throw it out, and it can be a lot faster. And probably mostly because when you screw up, changes are so much easier.
Yeah, that's understandable. But, like you were saying, you could really just waste too much time on something that someone will probably just skim right over on a page, right? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's all about the mindset you go into. Like any job, I've wasted more time, as much time on paper, doing different styles, and putting pressure on myself where it was completely not necessary. The one big thing that Joe Kubert, I don't know if he preached it or it's what I gleaned from the school, is it's a commercial art. You get paid by the page. If you do 1 page a day, you make X. If you do 2 pages a day, you make Y. So it's a commercial art. You've got to know your craft, but belaboring stuff doesn't do anyone any good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
definitely. It takes a long time to sink in, and I still struggle with it now.
So, speaking of Kubert School, I know you did work for Marvel, CrossGen, all these other places along the way too, but you get to this point in your career where you end up going back to Kubert and teaching for them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I taught there 1 year.
What was that experience like, going back after all those years and kind of being the guy at the front of the class as opposed to the guy at the back of the class?
Well, I've never liked public speaking, so that was always rough. I was always up there sweating like a moron, just completely kind of overwhelmed by it. But I do love the teaching aspect of it, not necessarily the coming up with the plan and everything. That's easy. But what I loved about the teaching aspect was questions. It was great having a classroom, and say I had 20 kids in my class. There were probably 5 to 7 or 9 that were really into it, and the others were just at school, like any other, place after high school. They paid. It's kind of interesting, but they're just blowing through it. They don't care, or at least it didn't come across that they cared. And you get questions from a bunch of people, and it really makes you think about what and why you're doing things and making decisions. And that's the part I completely enjoyed then, and to this day about teaching is, having to answer questions that you never thought of. Because when you're doing this, you just sit down and do it. You get your page done. You go on to the next page. You kind of stop thinking about it because you're just doing the job. So when you have to sit back and say, God, why did I do that? It really makes you assess your art again, and makes you more aware of decisions you're making and how and why, which improves your art. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting.
Very nice.
And yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You start it's Ominous Press?
Yeah, Ominous Press.
And you're doing a bunch of stuff there. So first, was that yours from the get-go? Like, that was your idea to, like, I want to do something on my own?
Yeah, I had gotten hooked up with Wizard and done a bunch of covers and created the Brutes and Babes How to Draw column there. And when everything started taking off in the 90s, I had just done Exo and Turok, and made a nice royalty. So I thought, I'm going to start my own company. Image did great. Valiant's doing great. Let's give it a shot. And I was probably a year too late, because when we came out in '94, everything had started to tank. And but that's where Ominous came from. So it was my characters, my stories, my thing, and I had a contract with Toy Biz to do the 3 views for the sculptures, for the toy sculptures, and all the package art. So I built a studio to handle that amount of work, and train guys to help out on the toy stuff, and train guys in color and different stuff, and bought a bunch of computers back then that were, I mean, I bought the most powerful Mac you could buy, and it's your phone is 10 times more powerful right now.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we would have a process going. We'd click it on Friday, and we'd come in Monday morning, and it was just finishing. I mean, it was nuts. But so I built a color studio and all that stuff, and I was like, well, I've got all this stuff. I'll just use these people, to do the comics for my company as well. It's being paid for by Toy Biz, and then we'll have the comics on top of it. And then Toy Biz yanked the contracts before we started. So that was a struggle. So that's pretty much why the company died, is I couldn't get enough cash flow fast enough to keep the studio going.
Did you bring it back at any point? Because I saw in 2017 you were doing the Brutes and Babes books again.
Yep. I partnered with a guy who was a part of the company at the end in the original company, and that didn't work out, so I'm not part of that anymore. I've been separated from Ominous for about 4 years now.
So let's talk about now what you're doing. I see you got the new website up. It looks great. Okay. And you're putting pages up there and stuff. So that's kind of where you're at right now. You have all these awesome pages and covers and prints, and you're kind of selling those through your website right now.
Yep, I do a lot of stuff for indies, and I've got a 12-issue job with a new company called Phenom Comics.
Okay.
I just did Hunter Ninja Bear as a Kickstarter, mostly for awareness. I mean, they're guys that run it are really smart, I think, and they're in it for the long haul. They've been working on this for 5 or 6 years now, maybe even longer. And I just started with them last year, and about 3/4 of the way through the first issue, and we're just taking it slow and easy. So that's one project. I'm trying to build Bart Sears art and do more teaching stuff and more videos and all that stuff. And planning another book, Drawing Powerful Heroes 3, the splash page, which is sort of a redo of a book I did in the late 80s, early 90s. So yeah, I'm trying to build all that stuff. I have a bunch of other, private projects to work on. I'm doing Maiden with my wife for heavy metal.
Yep.
And just a lot of irons everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get things going.
And you said indie, you're doing a lot more indie stuff now, and is that because, like you said, it's more casual, and that's kind of where you're at right now? Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Well, we just moved from Florida to New York. Okay. And we spent 6 months fixing up our house in Florida to sell it, and now we're here and we bought a fixer-upper. So we've been here 6 months, and we're hoping for a shower in the next 2 weeks.
There you go.
But it's just easier to get one piece done and one piece done and one piece done. And
understandable.
we have to, go work on the house for 3 days and not worry about blowing some deadline.
Yep.
And Marvel and DC won't hire me, so.
Oh.
So there's that.
I don't know if they can afford you with your art.
Oh, they can definitely afford it. They just don't. They want everything as cheap as they can get it.
Well, now that you've been around for a while and gone through the industry, pretty decently with most of the major publishers. I mean, it's gotta be nice. You do your own thing. You can jump on Kickstarter. You can work with whoever you want. Really, I mean,
sort of, yes. I mean, Kickstarter and crowdfunding is great, but you really have to be a master social media guy to build that stuff up. And YouTube is seems to be the biggest place to benefit that. It's just something about the live stuff and the videos and stuff, which honestly I wish I thought about and started doing in early 2000, but never did. I'm just a guy that sits here and draws. I got this whole setup to film everything I draw for 2 months now, and I've yet to turn it on. So,
well, that's a whole nother market in itself, because I recently, through work, met someone that he's not even reading comics anymore, but he's just into comic book art, like what you're selling through your page, and they do YouTube videos, art drops, and all this stuff, and he's watching these YouTube videos where people just watch them, and it's okay, we're dropping art today, and we're going to watch this video, and they display the art, and people bid on it and stuff like that. That's a whole nother thing I didn't even know was happening, so
I had no idea either.
Yeah. And I think, for you to have a lot of your pages up on your website and pretty easily accessible, I think that's a good way to do it. But for my own curiosity, is there any Justice League pages going up on the website?
I don't have any.
No, you don't have any? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I've been a freelance artist most of my life with multiple kids, and whenever anybody wanted to buy anything, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah, that's understandable too. No, that's all good. You still have quite a bit of art on
are the big theme.
Yeah. Well, you still have a lot of good stuff up there. You're doing a lot of prints for your original covers too, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are they signed prints?
The small ones are the 11x17s. The bigger ones are print on demand, and they go straight from the printer to whoever buys them. They can send them, arrange, if they buy it through me, we can have it sent here, and I'll sign it, repackage it, send it out. But of course, that costs more.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, yeah, and I love the selection of prints. Was looking at this DC versus Marvel Wizard number 54 cover earlier, beautiful print.
Thanks, man.
And a bunch of these Justice League Europe prints as well. So there's cool stuff on the website, and even the pages you have, even if you haven't necessarily heard of the book, or it may be something indie you did back in the day, I think people can appreciate the pages themselves throughout it too. So there's a lot of really cool stuff.
I think the most of the pages up there are the Volsung Viking stuff, which is actually really new. I just did that. Chuck Dixon wrote it, and it was for Compass Comics, which is Graham Nolan's super powerful, big manly sized comic, whatever the heck it's called. I can never remember the name.
Yeah.
But it's Compass Comics, so. And that was the first time I'd ever drawn anything Chuck wrote. So
okay.
That was pretty interesting. And he's a tight writer. I like to change stuff, but it was hard in his script to change anything. That's how tight his stuff is.
And how is that? Because Volsung, there's a lot of awesome line art there with Vikings and Viking battles and shit like that. How was that for you to draw? Was that something you enjoyed doing?
Oh yeah, I'm a barbarian at heart.
Yeah.
I read Conan and Tarzan before most anything.
I remember you saying that. So this is right up your alley.
Yeah, so that's just my love. So
yeah, that's sick. Awesome. Well,
thanks.
And
BartSearsArt.com.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna pimp that out in the comments below. I'll let Chris say that.
Well, yeah, before we say our goodbyes, where can people find you online? Is there, you said you're not a social media wizard, but do you post on social media at all?
I try to post every day. Don't always make it, but it's at Bart Sears Art on Facebook, Bart Sears Art on Instagram, and Bart Sears Art on Twitter.
All right, so everybody out there.
BartSearsArt.com.
Oh. Yeah, so everybody out there, make sure you go check out the social media, subscribe to that, and also Bart Sears' website, as he said, BartSearsArt.com. I'll have those links in the show notes below, so you can just go down there and click on them and
awesome.
Get them that way
appreciate
as well.
That. Thank you.
I appreciate you stopping by and spending some time talking with us. Best of luck with everything moving forward, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bart.